Okay. We have no apologies here. Okay. Agenda item 2 then are apologies. We haven't received any apologies. Has anybody?
Just that Edmund Push will be along later on. He's delayed.
No problem. And agenda item 3 then. I have received a letter from the Rural Development Council, and that's at page 10 of your packs, seeking a meeting with the Deputy Chair and myself to discuss how we can work together. The clerk has arranged a meeting for Monday at 2:30 for tea and coffee in the members' coffee bar, and I think that it would be appropriate that all members of the committee come along to that, or anyone who wishes to rather come along to that meeting. I think that everybody should get the opportunity to meet with the Rural Development Council, just I suppose to hear what it is they want to say to us, and then anything that you want to, I suppose, discuss with them. But I just think it would be beneficial for as many committee members to meet them as possible. So if you want to just let Stella know if you're able to attend on Monday. Okay. Agenda item 4 then are the draft minutes of the meeting held on 2nd of June, and they're on page 12. Are members content with the draft minutes?
Good.
Okay. And the minutes will be published online. Okay, there are no matters arising, so I'm going to move on to the next agenda item. Go ahead. Agenda item 6 is our oral briefing from Dara Veterinary Service Animal Health Overview. The first briefing is on an overview on the Veterinary Service Animal Health Group. And there's a clerk's memo on page 19 and a paper from Reyes at page 24 providing background information on enzootic and epizootic zoonosis. Dara's organisational chart and summary overview considered at last week's meeting on pages 26 and 27. So I'd just like to welcome Robert Huey, Deputy Secretary, and his team, Geraldine Fee, Colin Hart and David Torrance. Okay. We'll give you 10 minutes for the presentation, and then members will ask questions.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for this invitation. If I could just pass around 2 documents. One is an organisational chart of this top team for Veterinary Service Animal Health Group, and the other is a document I intend to talk to by way of, thank you, by way of putting some structure around this, because I'm not going to read, I'm going to talk. That's okay. Veterinary Service Animal Health Group, newly formed group within the restructuring of DAERA, brings together the former veterinary service with a group formerly known as AFIB, Animal Agriculture and Food Inspection Branch, led by Alan McCartney, who carry out inspections on farm and a lot of official controls, and a group previously led by Geraldine here, the Policy Group for Animal Health and Welfare. So it's a new grouping, and we're still in the process of forming and finding our new ways of working. The document I've given you gives you a little insight into how confused my head can be sometimes, but it's the main strategic thing I'm doing. And rather than going through an entire big long shopping list of all the things that Veterinary Service Animal Health Group now do, because it is so wide, what I thought I would do was start at the top and give you the strategic things that we're working on at the moment, and then the issues will fall out of that. Boxes in yellow along the top you might recognise as the objectives of the reformation or the reforming of the Northern Ireland Civil Service, where Malcolm McKibben is encouraging us to ensure that our organisations are well led, high performing, focused on outcomes, and I have that along the top of this to keep that in mind, that is our modus operandi, that's how we now operate. The middle box there, the Veterinary Service Animal Health Group Formation Steering Group, oversees our three main projects. And apologies for the alphabet soup, but it'll become obvious. The three main projects that we're involved with are trying to deliver are the TB Strategic Partnership Group and the new way we're going to be looking at TB when that report is made. A restructuring and a reforming of the former veterinary service. That stands for Veterinary Service Target Operating Model, and the NIFAS project. If I could start with the restructuring, because it illustrates what we're trying to do and the way that we think about things. Back 5-6 years ago, we started trying to look at how we could be more effective and efficient within the veterinary service group. We formed a strategy group. We made assumptions about things going forward. And the important ones of those assumptions were things like that we would be required to make 5% savings year on year between 2015 and 2020. We got that fairly close to being right. That we would still have TB to deal with, and that brucellosis would be working towards being a thing of the past, our control programme. So those were the sort of assumptions we made. There were 47 of them altogether, and we laid out a plan. And that plan looked at things like our portal controls. We currently, or up until recently in Northern Ireland, we had 24/7 cover at our ports. That exceeds what they do in Dublin, for example. With the result that we have stronger controls between Great Britain and Northern Ireland than between Dublin and Holyhead, for example. We've looked at that and we've decided that we can do this on a risk basis rather than 24/7, and that'll be allowing us to reduce our number of staff at the ports between 42 to about 24. And that's just an illustration of the work we're trying to do to modify our services to become more efficient and still to be able to offer the services expected. We're also looking at the restructuring of our field offices. We have 10 management units in the field at the moment. We're going to reduce that down to 6. We've started that process at the moment. That's not about closing offices, that's just about restructuring. The structure we had been there for 50 years. Farming had changed in that period, so we're looking at a way that we can deliver our services in a more holistic sort of way. And one of the most important things we did was to review and to restructure the way in which we deliver TB testing through our practitioner colleagues. Our practitioner colleagues deliver £6.5 million worth of TB testing to farmers in Northern Ireland. It had never really been properly procured. There are issues of the delivery that had been criticised in 2009 by PAC. We needed to procure the TB testing, and we found a method of doing that, and at the same time delivering 9.6% of savings. And if you want to talk about that later, we can talk about that. The NIFAS project is moving on. We've got to the stage where we have awarded a contract, and there'll be more about that later if you want to go into those issues. And we talked last week a good deal about the TB Strategic Partnership Group, and again I'm sure questions about that will come out later on. Down the left-hand side of this diagram, there are a number of strategic things we're looking at. The Permanent Secretary has asked me to look across the new department at science. The Departmental Board were aware that the new department did a lot of science. In fact, we do most of the science now outside health. AFBE, of course, delivers service for DARD, a non-departmental public body, but the former DOE and NIEA also have their science programme. So I'm having a scoping look at that, with that group. I'm having a look at how we do science, looking at the state, looking at how we procure science, looking at the science that is done, the evidence and surveillance, in order to see if there's overlaps or savings or efficiencies that could be made there. And a report will be going to the Departmental Board and to this committee in due course on that. Myself and Geraldine independently we came to the same conclusion that we would very much like to have an animal health strategy for Northern Ireland. We've never had one. A number of the other jurisdictions on these islands have one. Why is it important? It's important so that I have a framework in which to work, because a lot of decisions we make at the moment would be better if they were made within a strategic direction, a framework, and we don't have one of those. As an illustration, last week we were talking about, on the verges I was talking to Mr Poots about a disease, malignant catarrhal fever, which is a production disease. It's very devastating to the farmers that have it. And how we deal with diseases, which ones that we intervene as government, which ones are better done by private sector, how we relate to the agri-food industry out there, how they input into our policy directions. There's no strategy document that says how that should be done, and we want to have a look at that and see how it's done. Wales have produced one, Scotland have produced one, so we don't need to start with a blank sheet of paper. But we hope to take that forward sometime this year, resources allowing us to do that. Beneath that, we're also having a look at surveillance. Surveillance comes in two sorts: passive surveillance, active surveillance. It's important underpinning of trade. It's the way in which we find diseases that we don't want quickly. It's the way in which we offer reassurances to third countries that we have freedom from disease. It underpins everything we do. We have never had a stand back and look at what we do. We've been doing the same thing again for 50 years. England, Wales, Scotland and even the Republic of Ireland have had reviews of how they do surveillance, and I'm starting a review of surveillance in Northern Ireland. I've asked Owen Denny, you'll see in your organogram there, to have a look at this. Owen's senior epidemiologist, a man with experience in these sorts of areas, has the right context to think about it, and he's going to have an initial look to see if we're doing the right things with surveillance. Are we looking at the right numbers of farmed animals, for the right things, companion animals, horses, wild animals? Are we doing the things we should be doing? Are we doing it in the most effective and efficient way? So that's coming along, and all of this underpins our international strategy and market access. I should have apologised first up that Perpetua McNamee is not with us. She's in Dublin today on other duties. And Perpetua leads for me on international strategy and market access, but I'll cover the questions as well as I can. It's simple economics that if you drive your industry to produce more and you haven't got the markets for it, you're going to depress prices. And the emphasis is on us in veterinary service to ensure market access, because every market for animals and animal products requires an animal health veterinary certificate, and that has to be agreed between folks like ourselves, between CVOs, between authorities, before any exports can happen. And quite frankly, it's something that's used across the world as a trade barrier to slow down trade, and we have to involve ourselves in those negotiations, and again, happy to answer questions later on it. Related to that, over on one side there is the case for negligible risk for BSE status. Again, that's related to trade, and happy again to take questions on that as it comes round. The AMR is about antimicrobial resistance, which is a huge issue on its own. We in DARD have no statutory obligations. I have professional obligations, and the questions around the use of antimicrobials in animals and animal production is an important one, which I need to keep up to date with, and to try and influence and steer the industry in how they use these valuable resources. Down the right-hand side then is Equine Policy and Delivery Project. Horses in the department have always been a bit of a Cinderella. They're not an agricultural animal, and yet I have an interest in them as far as exotic disease is concerned. There are some very serious and scary diseases that horses can get: African horse sickness and equine infectious anemia, etc. We have a responsibility in DARD for horse identification through the passport system, and in a number of other ways. And of course, we have the great resource down in Enniskillen of the Caffrey College. But it's something that doesn't have a real home within the department, and the Permanent Secretary has asked me to look at how we deal with horses and to try and give it a better structure, and that's what that's about. There are 26 groups in Northern Ireland that represent the horse. They have an umbrella organisation, the Equine Council for Northern Ireland, and they are our preferred consultee that we talk to first on most issues. But we need to try and do a better job for the equine industry, a significant industry that employs a lot of people in its various different places. It's also a very good example of a cross departmental area, because when you start talking about horses, you talk about sport, you start talking about recreation, tourism, and it's something that my personal feeling is that we're not making most of as a region, and we have to look to the south of the border to see the examples down there. The customer contact, we're not in the lead with that, but that's about the DARD Direct offices. You heard from the Secretary last week that DARD now, Ardera, has a network of 70 offices across Northern Ireland. I can guarantee you very little, but one of the things I would think is almost hammered on is that this time next year we won't be in 70 places in Northern Ireland. And that will have an effect on everything we do. It's another strategic issue. And the final one there that's in that box is a review, a pilot of the inspection review. You'll have heard from senior officials before about the review of inspections, how we're looking at what we're doing. That review has now reported, and Veterinary Service have taken on to carry out a pilot. This is important for Veterinary Service because virtually everything that we do has got an inspection label to it, and it's it follows the red tape challenges, the good regulation challenges that we've had in the past, and we are piloting better ways of working, and that's just getting on. But of course that feeds into our Veterinary Service structure and looking at our target operating model. Underlying all of this, and I've talked very little about that, is all the other things we do as business as usual. Animal welfare I haven't talked about. Delivering meat hygiene service for the FSA I haven't talked about. Animal identification we haven't mentioned. Welfare, one of the most important things we do, I haven't mentioned. That's all business as usual and supported at the bottom of their professional development training. What makes our group unique? What makes us different from the rest of of DAERA is our unique knowledge, and we're only of use to you and to the agriculture industry if we maintain that knowledge. So it's very important for me to ensure that we have a good programme of professional development training, because only by having experts within my staff can I deliver what you expect from me. Chair, I hope that gave you a sort of opening flavour of it, but I suspect the questions will put some shape around that.
I would say they will. Thank you very much, Robert. Appreciate that presentation. Just in terms of the animal health strategy, and I do think that it's a good idea, and if you've already got examples in Scotland and Wales, then that's a good start. Are there cost implications involved in that, or would you be hoping that it might actually negate some costs if we have a proper strategy in place?
Yeah. Yes, there will be costs involved. My current feeling is that we can do this in-house. We won't necessarily bring in consultants, which is the normal way of doing this. I'm not a great supporter of giving someone a pen, paying them to write down what you tell them, and then having to act on that on their conclusions. I would prefer to do this in-house. We have difficulties with the resource on Geraldine's side and policy, because we've lost, as I said last week, some key staff. But I would prefer to start this in-house. I've talked to the other CVOs, as you'd expect, in Scotland and Wales about their approach, and they tell me that it can be done effectively without involving a lot of resource. One of the things that that I'd like to fix is how we consult and report to and receive information from the agri-food industry. We currently have a Animal Health and Welfare Stakeholders Forum, which has been going now for many years, Geraldine?
Oh.
Many
Long
years.
before my time.
Long before her time. But it's one of those committees that have it's running out of steam, and it's become very much a place where we go and report what we're doing, but it doesn't really do what I would like. I would like to have a more robust group who questioned us more and challenged us on our directions, and who gave us real and meaningful input. And one of the things that this will look at is the governance of of what we do on animal health and welfare, or animal health in this case, animal health and welfare. So that's the sort of the area that we want to look at. And it's this business too about what's an appropriate disease for government to be involved in, and what should our relationship with industry be. We now have Animal Health and Welfare Northern Ireland who are looking after BVD for us, a production disease. Animal Health and Welfare intend to move on to UNI's control programme. What should our relationship be with Animal Health and Welfare Northern Ireland? What should we do? What should we facilitate? If we do facilitate, how far should we go? These are questions that we deal with on a one-to-one basis rather than having a consistent strategy. And I think the time is right to do it. To be clear, Chair, there was intentions previously to do this. There was concerns at that time that it might in some way undermine Animal Health and Welfare's all-island Animal Health and Welfare strategy. I don't see that as being a difficulty. I see them as being two sides of the one thing. My colleague Martin Blake, CBO in Dublin, if he hasn't yet published, he intends to publish an Animal Health and Welfare strategy for the South. So I think the time is right to do this.
Thank you. Robin?
Thank you very much, Chair. Robert, thank you very much for your presentation. Robert, you've been introduced as Deputy Secretary. Are you still the Chief Vet?
Yes, both.
You're both? That's all right.
For the same money, Robin.
The same money. Value for money, Robert. You touched on
I'm head of GRIP. CVO is actually the title,
okay.
if you want it all.
No, that's not my question, Chair, by the way. Just can I, Robert, the main thing where I want to start with is APHIS, or as you refer to, NIFIS, which is our new scheme. APHIS served our industry well through BSE and got us through our identification. It was a role model to the world in non-identification. Where is APHIS now?
David.
Yes, APHIS is alive and well, and as Oscar Wilde said, rumours of its demise are exaggerated, but it is an old system. BSE is now talking 20 years ago. We are talking a long time since we first started traceability in Northern Ireland. NIFIS is the project I am leading, which is to procure the replacement for APHIS, and the committee's had previous briefs, and we're going to give a fuller update, I think maybe in September. But we have awarded a contract for the replacement for APHIS over a 3-year period, and the project plan, which is just about to be nailed down, is that in 3 years' time we'll be able to switch APHIS off but resume all the functionality that it delivers at present through the NIFIS vehicle. It is a fairly complicated move because it's not just BSE, it's not just disease control, it's all that market access, it's all the cross-checks against subsidies, welfare, the whole range of what Veterinary Service Animal Health Group does. So we've had to be very careful in terms of how we manage this transition. We have to be careful. I'll advise you that the successful company is the company that has built APHIS. So we do have at least continuity there, and we have an awareness on their part of how critical this system is to our business. They stood by us through BSE and in fact talked to the Commission at various times. And they're aware of the criticality of it. They're also aware of the complexity of what they're trying to build and what they're trying to replace. So that gives us a degree of assurance that we will be able to move from APHIS to NIFIS with minimal risk of disruption. The other way we're seeking to minimise disruption, and maybe a disappointment to some, because what we're saying is for that period of build we will do our utmost to actually not change anything. We don't want to be changing all that complicated functionality in mid-air, if you like. But the plan will be that as soon as we get to NIFIS, then we will have the modern, up-to-date technological platform that we can do further things on, be it working with Animal Health and Welfare Northern Ireland, be it helping to support the genomics initiative that you've maybe heard about as well, support the new way of delivering TB, whatever may come out of the TB strategic partnership.
Okay, thanks. Chair, just on a supplementary then on that, Gin Monitoring Round has about a 4.4 million in for it. If that bid's unsuccessful, where does it leave the project?
The project has been approved by the Departmental Board as being affordable. The full business case has been approved by DFP. It's a capital bid, so we believe, and we have assurances from Departmental Management that will be covered.
Yeah,
yes, we have in previous exercises, whenever a contract has been signed, that commits the department and the government to that contract. The contract was signed on the 20th of April.
Good. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. And David, sorry.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks again for the presentation. Since Robin beat me specifically to the AFIS and IFIS question, can I go into one specific bit of it? In terms of the BVD work currently underway, what was the uptake in the sense of people actually sending in BVD ear samples onto the voluntary element of BVD? And what's the assumed percentage infection rate at the moment? And presumably, to go back to David's last point, it will then be possible, when we get NIFACE underway, for purchasers to be aware of the BVD status of an animal, even if at the moment they're relying on the honesty of the vendor.
David, if you could do that bit while others think about the figures.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find my figures.
We did have a meeting with the market operators who asked us, would it be possible to have an interface which would demonstrate the status of animals, in other words, where they confirmed persistently infected but not complying with the restriction to stay at home. We took the view that this was actually very similar to the medicines legislation, where farmers are required not to present animals for slaughter which got medicinal residues in it. And whenever the farmer does sign his movement declaration, that's on the clear understanding that there's no restriction on the animal. So I take your point about honesty, but there actually is a solemn declaration that the animal is free to move and not restricted. By the time we get to NIFACE a couple of years down the line, I think it would probably be important to review the situation, because, without prejudice to what others may say, the anticipation is that BVD will be a much lower problem, and the cost benefit of making significant changes not just to NIFACE but also market management software to display that. We'll probably have to review it in the light of that, but NIFACE will be able to do it. I think that's the main thing, technologically and contractually, which are the two limitations on AFIS.
Just to be difficult while Geraldine gets the figures, the difference, of course, between medicines and BVD is that the department may hold the information on BVD or will not hold the information on medicines that have been administered in the preceding period.
Yes, there will be issues there. What we have been doing is we've been facilitating the markets with all sorts of information down the years, farm quality assurance, number of residents, that kind of thing, so the capability will be there.
Just on the figures, I can't give you it in percentage terms, but I can give you it numerically. Since the beginning of the voluntary programme, there were 598,000 tests uploaded, and since the commencement of the compulsory programme at the beginning of March, there's been 167,000 uploaded. So broadly, we're very pleased. It seems to be going. It's a high percentage, and it seems to be going well. And I'm aware that there have been some teething problems with accessing the Albany helpline, etc. But they're broadly to be expected at the start. But I mean, in terms of the turnaround time for tests, like 96% have been turned around within the 7 working days. So we have an overview of what is happening with Albany. Albany run the mechanical functions for us, and it's an industry-led scheme, as you know, and we think it's working well at this stage.
Thanks.
And that's, sorry, Chair, but that's a really important point, is that this is an industry-run scheme. This is the first time where the industry have got together, the veterinary practitioners, the private veterinary practitioners, the farmers' organisations, and decided that they want to eradicate this disease. And, you know, they have largely funded it themselves, they're largely driving it on themselves, and we're facilitating when we can. This is great, and it's a wonderful model for it to take forward.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sidney.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rob, and your team for speaking today. Can I touch on the TB situation and, as you call it, the strategic partnership group, is it, and such like?
Yes.
Where are we with that report going forward, bearing in mind that is it 30 is in the budget for going forward, and some percent of that is compensation costs?
Yeah.
How much? I see here that maybe inroads were being made, but for some unexplained reason, things maybe, as I saying, turned the other way, did it? But where do we see ourselves in this whole round of getting to grips with this whole situation?
Yes. As I said last week, you know, the situation with TB, not acceptable. It's not acceptable to the industry, not acceptable to me. we've had our programme. Our programme has been examined by the European Union inspectors. FEO inspectors came. They gave us the okay for what we're doing, but very much the direction that we needed to think about doing something more and moving the scheme forward. So the scheme that we have at the moment is considered by the European Union is fit for purpose. They actually supported to the extent of some £400 to £500 a year, but they clearly directed us that we need to think about some other actions to take. They talked to the members of the TB Strategic Partnership Group, and they very much were, the two groups were very much moving in the same direction. I'll move it to Geraldine because she's leading on this.
Well, the TB Strategic Partnership has been working assiduously over the past 18 months, and they hope to have the report out in the autumn. There is, Robert and I both sit on the group as ex officio members. We're not actually full members, but we report to them. So we have a way of ensuring that as DARD considers changes to the programme, that we're not running contrary to their direction of travel, should their direction of travel be accepted by the Minister and the Executive in due course. So while we're waiting on the final report of the group, it's fair to say that there have been ongoing improvements made to the programme. Colin might want to say something about that in due course. Where we are with the group is is currently getting independent consultants to have a look at almost stress test some of their recommendations. We're looking at it from a cost-benefit analysis perspective, from a behavioural perspective, and also testing out the science in that. That's taking a bit of time because albeit that it is an independent group, the procurement is subject to government procurement rules and there are processes to be gone through. So we're hopeful that the report will launch in the autumn, but I wouldn't want to give you the impression that there's nothing happening in DAERA to address the TB problem pending the production of that report. Colin, do you want to say anything about it?
Yes, one of the key focuses that we have at the moment is working on the sensitivity of the testing of cattle. And I think it's a well-known fact that the TB skin test is not 100% perfect. And the sensitivity of the skin test in the hands of an expert user might be 75%, 80% sensitive, which means that animals which have the disease are being left behind because the test just doesn't simply pick them up. So obviously it's key to the programme to remove infected animals at the earliest possible time. It's very important to us that we make the best use of the tools that we have at the moment. Now, the way we have approached that is there are different levels of interpretation of the TB skin test. The TB skin test is one where you introduce an allergen into the skin of an animal and a swelling arises, and 4 days later you measure the size of the lump. Depending on the size of that lump, the animal is a reactor, or it's an inconclusive, or it's a negative. In terms of the level of interpretation, we've started to use severe interpretation in a much more widespread way, which means that an animal with a smaller lump could be taken as a reactor. Now, we've shown statistically that an animal that is an inconclusive but is actually a positive and severe interpretation is 8 times more likely to have disease than an animal which was negative at the test. So we're using severe interpretation widely now. That's supported by the TB Strategic Partnership Group direction, and we've discussed this with them, and for a year now we've been using this very widely. And one of the members mentioned there, Chair, that the disease has levelled out since last October, November, December, and is coming down now. In addition, we're using the blood test for TB in a more flexible way now. And again, we've had discussions with TB Strategic Partnership Group on this. They're very supportive of an increased use of the TB blood test, which can pick up animals that don't react to the skin test. So again, we're trying to increase the sensitivity and through that leave less diseased animals behind using the skin test. The skin test does work, but it works at a herd level, and it works over repeated tests of the same herd. So at an animal level, the skin test is much less effective because it does leave 1 in 5 positive animals behind. But when you test a whole herd and then you repeat test the whole herd 60 days later, the skin test is actually a good tool, and we're keen to see that the skin test is used properly. So we've got severe interpretation, increased use of blood, the TB blood test, and additionally we've got a much more robust contract with PVPs. And the PVP contract, really, what we're seeking to achieve here is to see that all testers, whether they be DARA testers, vets within DARA or vets within the private sector, test animals to the highest possible quality and take as much care as possible to ensure that they identify reactors at an equal rate, both within DARA and within the private sector. So our new contract is very focused on the management of it leaves more emphasis on the practice manager and the lead vet within the practice to see that all their vets are doing the job properly. So there's much more emphasis on the business now to get it right. And if the business gets it wrong, there'll be penalties on the business. And this was a PAC recommendation previously, is that there should be sanctions against businesses that don't test to the absolute highest quality standard. So our new contract, we hope to, it's a robust contract. It's based on public service principles. And each and every practice, and we have 75, I think, practices across the country enlisted to do this work. So moving forward, if we can improve the sensitivity of testing in the hands of all veterinarians, again, this should only help the programme. So that's been a key focus of our work over the last year, and it is pleasing that the disease, which had been rising throughout the back end of 2014 and throughout 2015 up until October, started to level out then, and is now has turned a corner and is coming down, both at the animal incidence level and the herd incidence figure. So maybe that helps you.
Quickly in this, there's a lot in there, Colin, but I maybe did say that this was going to, but it was, in the terms of the report here, sort of unprecedented increase over years, and we're now maybe coming back a bit. But you know, at the moment it's costing 10 million a year when you take about 5 million coming from the European side of it. So at year on year, 10 million, this is what it's costing the department. Are you confident, or will you be coming back after this report? And I don't want to preempt the report, but when this report comes out in the autumn, are we in any way confident that we're going to make inroads here towards heading towards eradication, and also the £10 million is being spent year on year?
I'll take this. You know, I have to be careful because I don't want to preempt the independent report.
Let's get the figure right here. I'm just going. How much is it to cost the department?
Very round figures. We usually take it as 30 million, although it's been coming down from that over the years.
But over the compensation bit is.
The compensation is between 12 and 15 million. Yeah. Last year it was around the 14 million level. Right. So that's the level of compensation.
Right. Okay.
The 30 million is made up of compensation, the practitioners' costs, and then the cost of my own staff are also in there, and that's where the global figure of. Put your finger on there for me.
Well, it's 30 million and you get 5 million from the EU.
It was 28.6 million last year, minus 4 million that we got, so it's 24 million or so is the cost.
Right, okay.
So it's far.
It's a lot of money.
It's not acceptable.
Yeah.
And the way I look at this, and you know, I have the effort's going to be put into this, and I have enough confidence that I'm going to accept a hard target. Are taking TB down to, and down is where it's going. This is a very foolhardy thing to do because the TB bug doesn't read the report, and we will have to do real things to make this happen. But if we can implement the report, I often say it's almost like an invest to save. We will have to spend money because, as Colin says, part of the answer here is to bear down hard on the disease. get reactors out as quickly as possible. That's the same with any disease. When you do that, guess what happens to the incidence of disease in the short term? It goes up a bit, and then it starts to go down. There will also be costs involved in meetings we're going to have with farmers, with potential for wildlife interventions, and that's what's being costed at the moment. So we can come with a real figure. And then I'm going to accept a real target with the ultimate of eradicating this disease in 20, 25, 30 years' time. But on our way there, you know, I'm going to accept a target for 3 to 5 years, another one for 10 years. I'll not be here for that one. But that will allow a strong business case. We get this down from 7 to even 5.5%. That saves £5, £6, £7 million. Get it down to 3.5%, we're saving £15 million, something around that sort of level. This is serious amounts of money that perhaps we could be deploying elsewhere, you know, through Animal Health and Welfare Northern Ireland perhaps, to do something else about another disease. But at the moment, there's no money for any other disease because we're spending it on TB. This is something that we have to do something about. TB Strategic Partnership Group gives us the opportunity of a new and different approach. One of the things that I'm most passionate about that is a recognition that TB is actually an infectious disease. It seems obvious, but people have forgotten that. This is an infectious disease. It's a disease that kills people. But we've reduced it down to being a programme, to being a source of income, you know, for a lot of professional people. And we have to get away from this and try and do something about the disease. Sorry, I'm on a rant.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Harold?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. You don't mind me asking two separate questions, but they are on TB. They're not just supplementary. TB infected badgers, they are culled by a lethal injection. What is the means of their disposal?
Yes, I can take that. The badgers are removed to the AFBI laboratory and in Stormont. They're removed in accordance with regulations which govern the movement of high-risk material like that, and they're delivered immediately, basically, to the AFBI laboratory, where further samples are taken, further tests are carried out, and ultimately the carcass of the badger will be disposed of by incineration. So that's the method.
Okay. The other one's more of a compensation question. At present, TB reactors and animals get 100% compensation rate, market value, right? What is the percentage for the pedigree animal, an animal which is usually at a higher value?
It's 100% compensation.
It is.
Yeah.
It's 100% of an unlimited ceiling at the moment.
Just there's an incident at this minute in time.
Yeah.
It was in the paper there just a couple of weeks ago. Did you see that one?
Oh, I'm very well aware of that one, but of course can't comment on a particular farmer with a particular problem. But in general terms, process of valuation is carried out by our own staff. We have a team of expert staff who do the valuation. They keep themselves up to date, they benchmark themselves. There's a lot of work goes into that. And a very large percentage, 98% of farmers accept the valuation, and the valuation is paid in full on all animals. That is something that I think it's fair to say is being looked at by the TB Strategic Partnership Group, and they will be coming forward with the recommendations on compensation in the body of the report.
Thank you.
What maybe is confusing you, Harold, is that brucellosis is different. Brucellosis is not 100% when we have brucellosis.
Comparing the
Colin, can you
pedigree to the...
The brucellosis was 75% of above a certain level, but I mean we're not valuing brucellosis animals now because there's so few any animal removed under the brucellosis order at the moment there are still animals that react to the test, and that you do see occasional animals because you get cross reactions with the test methodology. But I think last year our total expenditure on brucellosis was about £1,000. That's the sort of level of expenditure. Thanks.
Okay, Kiva.
A lot of what I was going to ask on TB has been asked, so I'm not touching that again. If I could just go back to BVD there for a wee second. Since the compulsory test has come in March, has there been any feedback, or have there been any issues around compliance? Or do you envisage any?
Well, as I say, we're pleased with how it's going. We haven't had a report from Albany that there have been any compliance issues, and we're monitoring that. We get a management information report from them. Colin, a view on the enforcement side?
Yes. At the moment, our approach to enforcement of the programme is light touch. It's an industry-led programme. It's an industry-led initiative, and we're keen to see the thing bedding in before we would get too involved. In terms of, and I suppose really it's like anything else. People make mistakes. At the moment, that's not the level of interest I would have as a person who's responsible for enforcement of DAERA legislation and at the operational end. What I'd be more interested in is where I've evidence that somebody is actually driving a coach and horses through the programme. They're actually maybe actively seeking to buy and to sell on animals which are persistently infected with BVD, and as such have a very limited life expectancy. And although they look well at the point of sale, somebody would be buying an animal which wasn't fit for purpose. So we're meeting Albany regularly. We're developing systems which link the APHIS information on animal movements with the Albany database information on infection. And so we're well down a pathway here where we'll actually be able to work with Albany to be able to say who has moved a persistently infected animal, or, for example, who has moved an animal which was the dam of a persistently infected animal, because we might want to catch up with that cow and test her in the herd that she's in, and she might have moved legitimately. So there are issues linking APHIS information to Albany information, and we're well down a road to be able to match that up. So yes, we will be keeping a very close eye on this, and where we think, I think so, the approach to enforcement is light touch at the moment, but where we think that people are abusing the system, we will take action, and that's really...
The problems with the scheme so far have largely been teething ones. Farmers not putting the right postage on the box, putting the wrong paperwork in, not completing the paperwork properly. That sort of thing that happens. But so far, so good.
Thanks for that. Thanks.
Just to follow that up, there are criminal penalties in the order. So there's if the offence involves one animal, there's a maximum fine of £5,000 and/or 1 month's imprisonment. So, that they would probably only be deployed. You'd seek a prosecution in extremis, but they're reasonably significant penalties and as a backstop.
You keep it, George.
Thanks, thanks, Chair. And could I thank Robert and his team for their presentation. My question would be that, just to ask you, will the veterinary department be part of the move to the new headquarters in Ballykelly in a couple of years' time?
Yes, in fact, 2 of my team are already there. As part of the advance party, Colin is currently headquartered in Coleraine.
Good soldiers.
Perpetua is, well, Colin lives not that far from Coleraine. And Perpetua is in Orchard House, not in Orchard House, she's up in Derry, London Derry. Her headquarters is there. Yes, my headquarters is going. I have just short of 100 people in Dundonald House at the moment. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be particularly difficult for professional staff who can't move from department to department. There's nowhere else for them except veterinary service or AFBI, non-departmental public body, the only place where vets are employed. And of course for the staff in Geraldine's side who have background and historical knowledge of the policy areas. It's something that we're actively trying to manage, and we'll take advantage of folks leaving who are leaving at the moment to fill with people ready for going to Ballykelly, so that we can get some sort of continuity. Don't see this as being a big bang. It'll happen gradually. It's already started, and it'll continue through the years until the transition has happened.
So you don't see any problems when
I see an enormous number of problems. And if you want to examine the problems in detail, it's easy, because they did this some years ago in the Republic of Ireland. They moved agriculture down to Portlaoise, and they did a very, very good post-project evaluation, warts and all. So if you want some concrete evidence as to what's going to happen, read the post-project evaluation. That's what they're for. But it gives us the chance to recognise the challenges and try and do something about them. But no, this is not easy. And we talk glibly about posts moving to Ballykelly. This is people. This is people. And it's an awful lot of them are people who, are happy in their job, never sought promotion, stayed where they were, have been working in the same job, giving good service for 25 years, and they feel that we're walking away from them. We're abandoning them and saying, oh, you can get another job somewhere in Belfast. This is causing real hurt, but we're working our way through this. So is there problems? Yep.
Not an easy transition.
Not easy, but we'll get there.
Okay, thank you.
Oliver?
Yes, thank you, and thanks for your presentation. In the last mandate, there was this thing pointed at the two different standards of the veterinary service, the private and the departmental, which was, to my mind, was a red herring, but it kept being thrown up. When you say the standards will have to be at a high level, Robert, have we got the stuff in place there to monitor that, to ensure that will be of the highest standard?
Yeah, I'll let Colin answer on this, but just to say that this new contract was a very significant piece of work. It was a very difficult piece of work, and in fact Colin's efforts on it has been recognised by the NICS Awards, for which he has a nomination. It was difficult because I had a very clear view of what my outcome was, which is that I wanted, if at all possible, to keep the testing within the veterinary profession in Northern Ireland. My concern was that it had gone to open tender, that might not have been the case, that it could have been a larger company from somewhere else in these islands that came in and did the testing from outside. And I very much, for reasons of surveillance, the direction of travel of the TB Strategic Partnership, wanted to maintain the relationship between the farmer and his private practitioner. Who better to give advice to the farmer than his own vet about a disease, as long as you're recognising it as a disease, rather than just doing a test. So that was the direction of travel. So we had to find a way of getting to that result. And Colin and his team found a novel way through a thing called Recital 4 of the European Procurement Regulations, which allowed us to award the contract by benchmarking. That's a little bit of background. Let Colin answer your question about the quality of the tests.
Yes, well, under the what we now have as a proper public service contract, I have a contract manager, a full-time contract manager, who's responsible for looking over all the aspects of the programme, which starts at the induction training of new vets as they come in, the importance of the TB test to the TB programme, and that we've now got ongoing development of our vets, both in practice and within the department, in terms of what the priorities of the programme are, and really the messages that we want those vets to convey to farmers. So we have the training aspect, and very importantly for me is to know, in the private sector vets as well as my own, which vet is testing, where are they testing, and when are they testing? Because on that basis, I carry out a programme of on-the-job checks, and we've done this for some years. And one of the issues we found was that because of the way general practice is set up, there are regular changes as to who goes where because of maybe emergency work that arises in the practice. So in some cases we were finding it very difficult to actually supervise the person we wanted to supervise. So there's quite an emphasis under the new contract of telling us, even if it's a last minute change, so that we don't waste time going out to supervise somebody who we've already supervised and who we're happy with. And at the other end of the scale, we keep missing somebody that we really do want to focus in on. So we need to know who, where and when, and then we will use our on-the-job supervision. And we have teams of supervisors who are specially trained for this job, who are very expert in TB testing, and who will be seeking to make sure that the fairly demanding requirements of the TB skin test are met in full, because only by doing that can we ensure that the sensitivity of the test, and back to the sensitivity, is as good as it could be. That pressures that might come to bear from farmers, for example, and we hear anecdotal evidence of this, is that a farmer who is using the private vet to do the test and who's going to be thoroughly inconvenienced by the TB breakdown is actually not able to overly influence the testing vet. So that's a key issue. And the PAC in 2009 raised the question of, is there a conflict of interest here between the private vet and his own client? And whatever way you look at it, it's a difficult position to be in. But the approach we've taken here is to manage that conflict of interest, because we think the private vet is the person to do the test, because that vet is in a unique position between the department and the farmer. He quite often commands most often commands the complete trust of the farmer. So he's in a very good position to communicate scientific messages about TB, about other things, to the farmer. So we were keen to preserve that relationship as we procured this service, whilst at the same time ensuring that conflict of interest, or the potential for conflict of interest, was not an issue. And we've published the contract. There are financial sanctions in it. There are KPIs for practices, and there's now a tight monitoring and management system, even more so than we previously had. And through those measures and many others that I probably couldn't go through all the details today, we do hope to ensure that all practices test to the same exacting standard. The majority have been doing extremely well over the years. We have had suspicions about some. We didn't rule anybody out of this new contract, but we will be monitoring them very, very closely. And that's the message that we've talked to the private vets. They understand where the department is at. They understand the reasons. And they've worked very well with us to get to this point. So hence the procurement, which we introduced on the 15th of April, was seamless. We moved from the old contract to the new without any farmer being inconvenienced. So we had lots of cooperation from the private veterinary colleagues, and going forward I don't expect anything less.
Only one private colleague decided not to take up the new contract. He decided that at the age of 94 perhaps he should stop testing.
Yes. Yes, go ahead. All right. One of the big problems on testing, etc., and finding reactors and that is lockdown. Can we find any way of doing something to alleviate the problem of lockdown on the farm for the length of time? Because it is throwing up more and more problems as we go on, Robert, because of last year we had problems of getting feed in.
This is a key aspect of any disease control. That whenever you've identified a disease, you don't allow that disease to spread. And I don't underestimate the inconvenience that causes farmers. but I have to think about the next farmer who might be inconvenienced even more by animals that are infected. Because remember, this is a disease, spreading the disease to other farms, plus the amount of expense and all the rest of it that cost all involved. So it's always a balance. One of the things that we've been looking at for some time now is alternative control herds, and how we could, in particular circumstances, assist both ourselves and the farmer with this problem of restrictions. There are particular situations with herds who only finish and in the case where all the animals are going for slaughter, and we've been looking at that. It's an ongoing piece of work. TB Strategic Partnership Group have looked at those issues as well. But where we can and where it's not going to cause a risk of further spread of disease, we will try and work with the industry. And have you any examples or anything, Colin, you want to say about controlled risk herds or anything?
One of the issues, I think, is the question of calves from the dairy herd, and that might be one example of, when the dairy herd is locked up, the male calves from the dairy breed are not normally retained by the dairy farmer. So what he could find is that the normal line of supply that he had to the market is suddenly stopped, and he's got all these male calves that he's really no wish to keep. One of the possibilities is some sort of integrated system, and this is the sort of thing we've been discussing with the industry, is could we allow those to move to a facility which is biosecure, so that where we're actually managing the risk of disease in another way by means of possibly housing those animals, and in turn, when they are then mature enough for slaughter, they go direct to the abattoir. The question is, with all the proposals for alternative, we call them actually alternative control herds, and this is an issue which has been offered to the industry at the moment. The alternative control is based on, rather than test the animals and allow them freedom to be in whatever field the farmer wants to put them in, is actually to control it in a different way, is actually to contain the animals, because we already know that they're very high risk of spreading disease. So they must be contained so that they don't spread disease to other cattle, or indeed to badgers, which could then spread to other cattle. So, so far the industry hasn't taken up the options that we've come up with. We're still talking to industry on this, but it is a difficult position, because the commercial farmer obviously operates in a certain way, and although certain commercial farmers may be prepared to buy animals that have come from a TB breakdown herd, have tested clear, but they're still not allowed to move, this farmer could use them. Those farmers, by and large, want to operate in a way which is not dissimilar to the way they're currently operating, which is quite often to graze the animals. So if you've animals which are much more likely to have TB grazing the countryside, you can guess what will happen. So we've been very nervous about measures to introduce alternative controls, and we've been the recommendations we've made to industry so far have been based on the protection of the wider industry. For bear in mind that even with herd incidence of 7%, such as we have at the moment, 93% of herds are free of disease. We don't want disease spreading any further to the 93%. So that, maybe I've said enough, but that's broadly the conundrum we're in at the moment. Yes, we'd like to do more, but to do more puts farmers at risk. So the result is farmers that have breakdowns are locked down, and it is a burden on business, there's no question. And the best thing we can do for them is to help them to get it free as soon as possible by good quality testing, by helping them with biosecurity advice, and just by and large working with them to clear their breakdown up as soon as possible.
We really would need to move on to the next presentation now. Robin and Harold have both indicated they want to ask a question if it's related, and we can get very brief answers to them.
Yeah.
Very brief, Chair. Robert, when you were going through your organogram, bee inspections, where are we in Northern Ireland?
Yeah. Bee inspections currently carried out by Forest Service, Plant Health, for Plant Health, and as part of this, trying to work together to have a more integrated inspection system we're going to carry out a pilot which involves bee health and other farm inspections to see if we can do it more efficiently. So
Is the bee inspections a new thing, or have they always,
it's always been there.
are we seeing a trend?
Yeah, we are, and it's in the public domain. The statistics are circulated by the plant health colleagues in forestry. We have European foul brood in the country, and we have African foul brood. And inspectors from the plant health colleagues are already out doing inspections for this year. They have found new outbreaks this year again, and it's an area of great concern, and they're working with the beekeeping public. I know that they're producing a bulletin which goes out to all registered beekeepers to notify them of the risks of not taking biosecure measures.
Okay, Harold?
Yes, Madam Chair. Robert had mentioned brucellosis. We'll just quickly touch on it. Brucellosis is almost eradicated, right, Senator? I believe that the farmer played a major role in that for a simple reason. Any female animal over 1 year old go until a show had to be tested before allowed to move to that show, and within 30 days, particularly for the local shows. Now, obviously, that has worked. Do you see any case for that in TB?
Very different diseases, and I do recognise the part that everybody played in getting us to freedom. It's also worth noting that there are great benefits from freedom because it's allowed deregulation of the farmer, and that he's now carrying out much less tests, and it's also to give savings to us, which is good as well. Conlon, do you comment on the question?
I think really the substance of the question is pre-movement testing. It's what we call pre-movement testing for TB, and it's a very complex issue. And I'm aware that time's very short today, but at the moment we don't do pre-movement testing. Every herd in the country is tested every year. Every animal in the country is, if they've missed a herd test, we trace them and we test them. So we ensure that every animal in the country is tested every year. But we don't insist that an animal is tested within 30 days of movement, except for export. And the question is, should we be doing that? Of course, the TB test, you have to go out twice. It's quite costly. It's not 100% effective. We talked about the sensitivity of the test. There's a number of reasons why it's not simple, but it is something that the TB Strategic Partnership Group has looked at in the round of proposals.
A quick supplement in that. An animal can be moved on, say, at 11 months.
Yes.
And sold onto another farm.
Yes.
No testing done.
No, but what we do is our computer triggers that animal, and we know which herd it's moved to. So after, I think it's 13 months, a test is set up no matter what herd it's in. So we catch up with it.
Okay. Going to move on to the next presentation.
Chair, I just could have your forbearance. I understand the complex some of this animal health business is, and we offer basically one-to-ones. If anybody wants to do a field visit, if anybody wants to call and try and get us to help them understand some of the programmes, very happy to do it. So if there's a group that wants to talk about TB, for example, go out to a farm and see a TB test, do that, to help you through this, because this is complex stuff. Which is partially why we're so lonely.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, our next briefing is on the June monitoring round and main estimates.
Just have a few minutes to leave, and then the officials will come in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Same for you to comment.
Higher up they changed them.
That's on the old.
Tells you.
Yeah.
Okay, our next briefing is on the June monitoring rounds, June monitoring and main estimates. There's clerk's memo on page 29 and an extract of Dara's budget 2016-17, page 31, and Dara's main estimates 2016-17, page 41. I realise that we have now got a paper, but obviously that's only come to us now. And obviously we're still in very early stages of the new term, but it would be much preferable for the committee members to have papers prior to the meetings. Okay. So just to welcome Louise Ward-Hunter, Deputy Secretary, and her team, Graham Wilkinson and Roger Downey. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. And yes, we do apologise for the late submission. You have a very short slide pack in front of you there, Chair, and I was going to propose that as we talk you through this, that as we end each section, if it's agreeable to you and to members, that we pause and take some questions at the end of each sensible chunk, if that's agreeable to you, in terms of being able to lift things as they arise, since they're set out into different areas in terms of capital and resource. Would that be helpful?
I'm happy enough for that if the members are agreeable to that.
Okay. Well, thank you again to Chair and members for the opportunity to brief you today on a number of items on a number of items relating to the Department's finances. As this is the first time that I have presented to you, I wanted to provide an overview of the Department's opening 2016-17 budget. So, starting at the block level, and the funding available for the Executive's budget 2016-17, which was determined by the outcome of the spending review 2015. As usual, the settlement for the Executive was determined by the application of the Barnett formula to the outcomes in Whitehall departments, and the impact of the resource reductions applied by the Chancellor was mitigated in our spending review outcome by the fact that the health and indeed the education sectors in England were both relatively protected. So from 16-17, this represents a resource nominal increase of 84 million to 9.745 billion, or a real terms reduction of 0.8%. And on capital, this represents a 52 million pounds nominal increase, or a real terms increase of 3.7% for conventional capital DEL. You have your slide pack in front of you there, and as you will see from the first slide, we have a total resource allocation of 215.9 million and 48.8 million of capital, and the table splits the funding out by group, with food and farming being the largest and includes AFBI and CAFRE and the administration of EU funding. So that's an explanation as to why that one is so large. On EU funding, just a word on tour on that. It's important to highlight that the 215.9 million is net of the EU funds administered by DAERA, and as members will be very aware, a significant element of the Department's work is in the administration of EU funds, and this is administered under two separate pillars. Pillar 1 covers the basic payment scheme, greening and young farmer payments, and equates to approximately 230 million per annum, or 2.3 billion euros over the lifetime of the current programme. And Pillar 2 is the Rural Development Programme, which has an allocation of 623 million, and again over that period up to the period of 2023. If you'd like to turn to your second slide, slide 2, or table 2, sets out the main constituent parts of the DAERA budget, and it might be helpful if I walk you through this and give you a bit of an overview of some of those elements. As you'll see, the most significant part of our costs are our staff costs at 116.2 million, and as members will be aware, we've just completed a voluntary exit scheme, and this is, you heard Noel talk about that last week, and we touched on it when we came before you then, but that's seen us reduce our staffing levels by 385 full-time equivalents, which will in turn produce for us annual savings of around about £14 million. We're assessing the implications of the VES and have developed a change programme to reshape how we do business in the future, and losing that number of staff clearly in such a short space of time is going to have implications for the new department on how we conduct business in the future, and this change is going to take time and investment, and we touched upon that, as I say, last time we were before you. Looking at GAE, General Administrative Expenditure, current and other expenditure. Next three items relate to GAE, current and other expenditure. They cover the main running costs of the department, which is spread across 70 locations, and this includes funding includes rates, utilities, maintenance costs, farm costs, enterprise shared services costs such as HR Correct, planting costs, and travel and subsistence. And then looking on down the table under NDPB funding, we've AFBI, that's our largest NDPB. It, as you know, provides a range of research and diagnostic services for the department. And as you'll see from the table, we provide annual resource funding of almost 30 million to AFBI. And I think it's important to reference that there's been a change in budgetary treatment for research expenditure. And as a result of changes to Treasury classifications, we now record research and development expenditure as capital, and as you may be aware, capital funding is not subject to resource reductions, and it's perhaps a positive development in terms of future funding for AFBI that change has taken place. Like ourselves, like the department, AFBI has a considerable fixed element to its cost base, with the majority of its expenditure that goes on staff salaries and wages. And AFBI has also taken the opportunity to reduce its staffing levels through the voluntary exit scheme. The resulting savings will go a long way towards providing a more secure financial footing for the organisation ahead. Looking next then at programmes at RDP match funding. I made a reference just a moment ago to the RDP, and you'll see that we have a match funding allocation of 20.8 million for the range of schemes. And the main elements of this funding are in respect of our agri-environment schemes, such as NICMS and ANC. And looking next then at our TB compensation and PVPs, private veterinary practitioners. The next two lines in front of you there equate to 18.5 million, and they're in relation to the TB programme, and it's important to note that we do receive annual funding from Europe to offset this cost. It can fluctuate a bit, but we have been averaging around about 5 million per annum, but we expect this to reduce going forward, and I know that you've just had Robert and colleagues in to present to you as well. CAP disallowance, we've also allocated 5 million to CAP disallowance in the current financial year. There's a fair degree of uncertainty around the exact risk to the fund. We've been investing in the LIPIS over the last number of years, and with the number of farmers applying online increasing, we've had an increasing level of confidence in our internal controls. At its peak, disallowance was at 5.1%, but in the last financial year this had fallen to 3.44%, which was clearly positive. It's not an issue that's unique to this department. All countries, member states across Europe, are experiencing disallowances to a greater or lesser extent, and we're making progress in reducing the risk. However, we remain resolved to reducing it to an even lower level, and have set ourselves the objective to getting the risk to 3% in the 2016 scheme year and 2% from 2017. And in the new role that I've taken up in my as part of my wider responsibilities within the department, I'm the head of paying agency, so as you can imagine, Chair and members, it will be exercising me very substantially going forward. On TRIPSI then, that's the total tackling rural poverty and social isolation, or TRIPSI allocation in 16-17, that's 4 million, and that's consistent with 15-16, and you'll see from your table that 1.8 million of resource has been allocated to that. And the main elements of this funding are due to be spent on 3 broad areas: community development, such as the rural support networks, that's just under 1 million, 0.9, assisted rural travel scheme, that's 0.3 million, and maximising access in rural areas, or MARA, and that's 0.2 million. And the other 2.2 million of the TRIPSI programme is in capital, and I will come back to that separately. You then can see the carrier bag programme. The main element of that is the 2.6 million allocation to the Environment Fund. This fund has been made available to eligible organisations to do 2 things: to protect and improve our habitats and the quality of our air and water, and also promote health, well-being, resource efficiency, sustainable economic development and access to the natural environment. There are a number of other smaller schemes. One is the repatriation of illegal waste to the Republic of Ireland, that's 0.2 million, and the local clean-up support to local councils in relation to fly tipping, which comes in at 0.3 million. And at the very bottom of the page there, you can see a note on income. So the final resource element is the 48.4 million income, of which the main items are bracketed under that. I'll highlight 5 for committee members. One would be our Forest Service receipts for the sale of timber, that's 9.4 million. Second would be NIEA income with 7.9 million, and that's on, related to regulatory aspects. Third would be the income from the Food Standards Agency, that's 6.1 million, and we obviously do work on their behalf and appointed meat inspectors. EU Vet Fund receipts, that's 5.1 million, and finally the carrier bag levy income, that's 4.6 million. So if I could invite you to turn the page over to resource savings, that's on our next slide, table 3. Over the last number of years, the public sector has been experiencing significant pressure on its finances, and indeed in the current year we've been asked to deliver savings of 11.9 million, or 5.7%. And this table in your pack sets out the breakdown of where the 11.9 million resource savings were found. In order to be equitable across DAERA, it was agreed that this cut should be allocated on a pro rata basis across the 3 former departments, which have now come together to form DAERA, and the vast majority of these savings have been delivered through the voluntary exit scheme, and indeed also the reclassification of some of the AFBI budget from resource to capital funding, which is what I mentioned before, through the new Treasury enabling mechanism. There are undoubtedly challenges in delivering our services with fewer staff. However, we are committed to changing our operating model and delivering differently in the future. And managing, I think, this financial picture with the size of the reduction, the magnitude of that reduction, is certainly a challenge. But we've a good track record, a positive track record in terms of financial management, and we will be maintaining that within DAERA as we go forward. So those 3 slides, Chair, represent the first piece, which is on resource. And it's at that point, if I would say I'd like to pause just in case there are any questions you'd like to raise at this point before we move on to capital.
I have a quick question, Louise. Do you see the amounts, are they allocated to the right headings? Just because some of the amounts didn't tally with, like, for example, whenever you were talking about TRIPSI, you were talking about 4 million, and it seems that might have been under the carrier bag programme. So
just that the overall programme is 4 million, so 1.8 million is resource, and then the balance is capital.
That's okay.
So
that's okay.
And
just in terms, I suppose, from my own point of view, I would probably like to have that in written format. You know, that actual
summary
breakdown. If we could get that, it would be. I think it would be beneficial to us just to have those. The detail that you've kind of given us there in the summary would be good to have in written format.
Absolutely. Chair, happy to forward that to you.
Okay. We have Patsy first.
Yep, thanks very much, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Just looking at AFBI there, does it engage in any sort of collaborative work with, well, I know it does, with Queen's and the likes, research work around the Horizon 2020? Is there drivable income associated with that, AFBI?
Yes, yeah. I mean, AFBI, especially they've just got a new chief executive just coming in, and I would have thought that actually that whole spirit of collaboration is one area that they will want to take forward. I know that they have a dedicated member of staff who is operating, Elaine, who's operating to try and make sure that they can draw down, bring together collaborative ideas in order to draw down funding effectively. So yes, I think that that will undoubtedly form part of their own strategic direction.
Well, I suppose maybe I'm bouncing you on this. You haven't any figures or facts as to what that
might look like at the moment. I'm not cited on that, but
we wouldn't have the detail at that level. I think overall AFBI's income's around £80 million a year. We wouldn't have that detail, but we can.
If there is, because it was in the previous committee I was on, it was a big issue to promote that particular R&D and to take it to a higher level, especially with the agri-food sector. So, Chair, if it would be appropriate if we could get that, please, in written form too. Okay, thank you.
We can come back to through the committee clerk on that.
Edwin?
Thanks, Chair. The 1.2 million for repatriation of waste, how did that come about?
How did it come about?
Well, it's not our waste. Republic of Ireland's waste. It's their responsibility, not ours. How did we come to be paying for repatriating waste that couldn't be here?
I will come back to you on that point as to what we're legally and statutorily obliged to do.
My recollection is that the Republic of Ireland were paying for the removal and repatriation of the waste. Not sure what's happened in the last 5 years. But we shouldn't be spending £1.2 million on somebody else's waste that should never have been here in the first place.
Just to clarify, it's only 0.2 million. It's only.
Oh, this was 1.2?
No, it's only 0.2 million.
Well, it shouldn't be spent anything, to be honest. We should be getting awarded costs from the Republic of Ireland for our staff's time, for their breaking of European rules and their irresponsible handling of waste. Thanks, Chair.
If we can get a response back to Kevin on
happy to bring that back.
Thank you. Oliver?
Chair, thank you. Thanks for your presentation. The income from the forestry, ground, etc., their income is 48.4 million. I noticed we didn't have any figures for leases of ground, for ground that we own, such as forestry ground, leasing out telecommunications. We have ground leased out to NI Water. I don't think that's included in that cost.
With the overall figure, Louise give a figure of £9 million for Forest Service income, so that's their top level number. So a lot of the details, those are smaller amounts of money, but those will be included within that figure.
Do we get a breakdown in that?
Yeah, we can give you a breakdown.
What exactly is in there? Is in there earning money? Thank you.
And David?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. I accept it's complex, but it is a bit confusing, the fact that some of the totals aren't the same in the paper that we had previously circulated in this, although it does appear that it's the issue of non-ring fenced DEL that's made the difference in terms of depreciation. But it's not terribly helpful when we get in figures which don't quite tally across, accepting all the complications of that. Can I ask specifically, though, on that? You referred to forest income in what I take it to be a DEL resource figure, yet the more detailed paper that was presented on, I think, your page 23 refers to Forest Service timber as AMI. How on earth is that AMI when it's normal income from normal operations?
I don't have your paper, so
that's the one that you presented to the executive, as far as I understand it.
I suspect that is to do with the valuation of the timber So that's a change in the value of whenever they do it every year as part of the accounts as opposed to the income is treated as AMI, but the Forest Service, the income that we get from that timber is treated as DEL. So they're two different things.
Just on that, you're on page 23 on the main estimates. The Forest Service income there is in row A5 under the accruing resources column, 9448.
Yes.
So that's the Forest Service income that
Right, so the AMI has done an assumed capital adjustment.
Yeah, well, that's the valuation piece of it. But.
Yes, that's the valuation of as Graham was saying, of the biological assets, the trees.
Yeah.
They vary in line with timber prices each year. So because that can be quite volatile, it's put into AMI because it's annually managed expenditure. So all volatile expenditure goes in there as opposed to DEL, which has tighter controls on it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Robin.
Thank you very much, Chair. But just picking up quickly, that's the value put on cut trees?
No, that's just
the
standing
trees. Standing trees, uncut trees, yeah. So you value everything that's still growing?
Yes.
How's that done?
Oh.
Do you go around and count them?
No. There's a model, Robin, that's used to actually calculate the value increase in timber prices. It's a fairly complex process.
Okay.
And it's purely done for accounting purposes to make sure that we're recording them in the account.
Okay. Come back there, sorry, Louise, in the income, the 48.4 million, 9.4 from forestry, 7.9 NIEA, 6.1 FSA, 5.1 EU vet, 4.6 from bags. My total 33.1. Where's the other 15?
Well, I'm sorry. What I said was that those were the main items.
Where is the other 15?
I would invite Roger maybe to give you a flavour as to whether or not what sits beneath that in the remainder.
Yes, there's CAFRE receipts from student tuition income of 2.3. We also get a rental income from AFBI because we own the estate, but they rent it from the department, and that's 6.3 million. There's 2.5 million salvage from animals that is slaughtered. And there's other veterinary receipts of 1.1 million, and then the balance is other income, which is a whole range of smaller things that add up.
What?
Sorry? Oh, we get income. Down to hundreds of thousands.
Right. Okay.
It's that sort of thing. That's why they're the bigger ones that are in the
I'm just wondering now. I know, Louise, you told me those, or told us those were the main incomes. Yep. 6.3 from rental of AFBI you didn't mention.
No, so.
Which would have been your fourth.
Well,
in terms of
highest income. Any reason?
Well, I suppose, Robin, it's in and out, so it's income from the department, but it's a cost for.
But it's still been listed here.
Well,
It's still been listed. So's your bags. Carrier bags going out at 4.2, but coming in at 4.6 grams. So I don't think that's a valid reason. 2.5 from salvage of animals. Where's that income? Explain that to me.
The salvage of animals?
Yeah, so basically that's the TB reactors. Whenever we have a contract with a company that lifts the reactors, and then they give us that money in return for the animals. So that's where that comes in.
So that is money for TB. Is that then put back into the TB?
That's in the veterinary service line, yeah.
That goes into them?
Yeah.
Is it ring fenced for?
Well, it's included in the veterinary service budget, so it's included as part of the programme. And whenever they talk about a figure of 30 million, that's net of that receipt.
That's net of that receipt?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Harold?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Speaker. I see there just 0.2 for fisheries. Is there any money, or has there been any money, funds for the decommissioning of fishing boats? Apparently 5 or 6 years ago, there was fishermen down and squealing to get this money. There was money available, but money was never allocated for these fishermen to get out of fishing.
Yes, I do recall that scheme. Sorry, you're saying, Graham, that Is there a point that...
No, I mean, at this stage, I recall that. I mean, we had difficulties in terms of the business case and proving value for money for that particular scheme. So there hasn't been any money allocated for a decommissioning scheme in the current financial year because of the issues that we will have around trying to prove value for money.
What's the future? Is it going to be, what's going to look at it, continue to look at it, or what?
I'm not sure in terms of what the policy position is, but I know across Europe and the Commission aren't that keen in terms of decommissioning schemes, and I'm not aware of any particular ones across Europe that there has been. So I don't think there is an intention for us to look at that at this stage.
Yeah.
Okay, Sydney.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Louise, just under table 2, running costs, general admin expenditure. I think did you mention 70 locations?
Yes, 70 locations across, which would include our...
Currently 70 locations. Is that, and going into the future, is that going to be more or less? Well, where are we here? Is there going to be less, or running costs of a number of locations could depend on how many of those locations going in year on year?
Absolutely, and I think that is part of the whole change agenda that we're looking at in terms of our own estate. And I know that Graham would like to come in and talk on that, but you're quite right. That number of locations has to be examined and looked at to see whether that is sustainable or desirable. It has to be
examined. What do you mean by that? When will that be? Or where are we with that?
Part of our broad change programme is about making sure that we are fit for purpose, not just organisationally in terms of how we're shaped, but also where we're located as well. Right.
Just a couple of things on that, Sydney. I mean, as you recognise, we have a larger department now, so that's why the number of locations has increased so significantly. We do intend to review our estate strategy, given that we're in a new department, to identify where there are potentials for synergies, looking where there are vacant spaces in the various locations that we're in. Also taking into consideration the number of staff. We have reduced very considerably the number of staff. So primarily we're going to be looking at the need for office accommodation and what is the optimum number of locations, or where should we be sited and located. So that's a piece of work that we are doing in the current financial year, and certainly we want to have a draft of our estate strategy by the end of this financial year. It is a significant piece of work, as you might imagine, looking at our overall estate.
Are some of these locations, are they leased, or are they?
They're a mixture. There are a mixture of leased and owned accommodation. A large part of our those 70 locations will be DFP run and managed sites. So it's a mixed bag, but certainly the intention across the NICS is to remove ourselves from leased accommodation, as that will save us resource funding.
Would it be a buyout of lease, or what would it be, Graham?
Well, it'll depend on each individual circumstance, looking at each on its merits. I mean, would have to do a value for money assessment as to whether it's value to actually buy out the lease or let it run its course and to utilise at least. But there is a significant piece of work over 70 different locations to try and come up with a revised estate strategy.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, just on the back of what Sydney has just said, is there any suggestion that the DARA direct offices are going to be reduced in number, or will any of them be closing? Or?
Well, the DARA offices are obviously part of that 70 number, so we will have to look at, as I said to Sydney, what is the optimum configuration across all of our sites. So no decisions have been made, but we need to look at the analysis to see, as I say, what the optimum is.
Okay, and I suppose just again in relation to that, I would like to think that given that we are a department that are concerned with rural affairs, that we would not be thinking that it's just easier to move everything to the city.
No.
So, you know, and I accept that in terms of staffing it can be difficult taking things out of the city, but we are a rural department and we should be looking after rural areas. Okay.
Are you happy for me to continue now? And I'd like to move, if I may, into the capital budgets. Turning the page, turning to capital, as with previous budget exercises, this was allocated from a zero base. The 48.8 million allocation will allow the department to continue to take forward the majority of DAERA's existing schemes and programmes. So Table 3 shows that there are three main types of capital expenditure in DAERA. There's capital allocation, which will allow the department to take forward priority investment programmes, and that's 21.1 million. IT systems, that's 11.3 million, and recurring capital, that's 16.4 million, totaling the 48.8. Starting first then in terms of headquarter relocations, and that's at the top of the page there. Largest budget, 10.4 million, is for the HQ relocation, of which 9.4 million relates to the move to Ballykelly. You'll be aware that planning permission was granted for this relocation in February, and construction contracts were awarded in March, and the process is currently in its design phase up until the end of September. The residual 1 million capital budget in 16-17 relates to the Rivers Agency relocation to Loughrea College, which is currently projected to be completed this October. Turning next to TRIPSI. TRIPSI allocation of 2.2 million, that was the balancing figure from the earlier mention of TRIPSI. This includes an additional 1.2 million this year to offset the 1.2 million reduction in the resource element of the programme. And the main items of this funding are due to be spent on the Rathlin Harbour refurbishment, rural broadband, rural sports facilities scheme, and village renewal pilot scheme. In terms of amounts, Rathlin is 0.5 million, rural broadband 0.3 million, rural sports facility scheme 0.3 million, and village renewal pilot scheme 0.3 million. Moving on then next to the RDP. The next item there is the 5 million allocation to the Rural Development Programme, and the largest element of this is the 2.5 million allocation to Priority 6 leader measures, including the Rural Business Investment Scheme and Rural Tourism, and a further 2 million is for the Farm Business Improvement Scheme, which is to support sustainable growth in the farming sector and is being rolled out in a phased way. And the early focus is on knowledge transfer, making advice and support available to farmers to help them clearly identify their needs and make the right decisions about developing their business. And this is intended to help farmers develop business plans that will be needed to access any future support for capital investment, preparing the way for the proposed FBIS capital scheme that is planned for later on in the year. There's also in there 0.5 million allocated for the new forestry grant schemes, and these opened last November, November 15, and the Forest Service has issued letters of offer for planting of over 180 hectares of new woodland prior to the end of spring 2016. Turning next to the Rethink waste recycling infrastructure, that's had an allocation of 3 million. That's to assist councils to increase levels of recycling by improving or extending their existing waste collection and their reuse and recycling infrastructure and services. And the key strategic drivers for funding come from two areas. It comes from the EU Waste Framework Directive. That has a target to recycle at least 50% of waste from households by 2020, and the EU Landfill Directive, and that is a target to divert biodegradable municipal waste from landfill, 35% of 1995 levels, by 2020. So both quite significant targets, and they're driving that initiative. In 2014, Northern Ireland had a waste from households recycling rate of 43.6%. But the increase in recycling, that recycling rate has sort of levelled off since then, so that's clearly an important issue. The funding is going to be used to incentivise councils to introduce source segregated curbside food waste collections, and that's in order to comply with the food waste regulations that will require councils to provide curbside food waste collections from the 1st of April of next year. Turning next then to fisheries. The allocation there relates to the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund, or EMFF. 4.6 billion euro national capital funding is required over the programme to match the 13.7 million euro European funding available, and that amount, the 0.2 million there, is currently the projected national spend in 16-17. Moving on down, FCILC and LNC. The final item of our programme's capital is for the Foyle, Carlingford and Irish Light Commission and the Livestock and Meat Commission, and this totals 0.3 million and mainly includes habitat reinstatement works, vehicle procurement and IT equipment for the FCILC and IT equipment for LMC.
Just maybe we might want to let members just ask questions because the next presentation is due to begin at 12. So rather than, I don't want it to be left that members don't have an opportunity to ask questions.
Okay.
So prepare to take questions. That's
certainly, Chair. If you want me to pause at that point, I mean, I can cover off any of the things.
Members need explanation of any of the further stuff. But
okay. Do you want me just to move very swiftly then, just to a conclusion then, or a main estimates? I mean, I think that the main estimates, that slide at the back speaks for itself really, and there's an accelerated passage. So happy to close.
Okay. So Oliver.
Very quickly, 0.3 million for broadband.
Yep.
Just find out where exactly this money is getting spent, because it is not getting around the countryside. And if you want to find out about it, you will lose a half a day of your life trying to find out, and even then you'll not find out.
Okay.
So that 0.3 it's a small figure. It's not getting into the far out rural areas, and that's right across the spectrum and on all areas. The rural areas are not getting the broadband.
Right.
And they're getting no information on it.
And I'll take that back and come back to committee.
Harold?
Yeah, the FBIS, Farm Business Improvement Scheme, you mentioned the capital scheme. What projects would be in that capital scheme?
Well, the capital scheme covers a wide range of areas, and I mean the first phase clearly was all about trying to get farmers tooled up in terms of the equipment and the knowledge transfer. But after that, there will be a tiered approach. And what to say a word or two about that? But it's a tiered approach in terms of the size of grant that people will be able to apply for, which will to benefit their business. And that was about maximising a broad spread, being able to go up to a certain level of capital and then a larger amount.
Yeah, so there are the two schemes under the FBIS. The first is for smaller capital grant scheme, which would be not to 30,000. And then the larger grant scheme, Tier 2, which is more transformational and much larger investment. So that'll be between 30 and 250,000 support. So that's the broad structure of the capital grant scheme.
And it would supplement. It would be, not only machinery but infrastructure, sheds, tanks, whatever that you mean.
Yeah, certainly on the tier 2, you'll be looking at a much larger scheme, which would be infrastructure, as you say, larger sheds, tanks, etc. Yeah.
And when would you expect that to be rolled out?
Well, at this stage, we're working through the business case, and we're engaging with DFP and seeking a final approval for the Farm Business Improvement Scheme. So once that's approved, we can start launching the scheme.
Okay, Patsy.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you. There would be, following on Mr McMullen's comments there about the broadband, I think it would be helpful if we could get what the criteria are around this, because many of us do represent rural areas where broadband, albeit in significant investment previously by Eddie, broadband accessibility to it still remains an issue, so the criteria for that would be very helpful. Secondly, can you explain to me what the CAP reform ICT is? I presume it's to do with the new rules and regulations around that. I presume, but...
Yes, pass that one to Roger.
Yes, it's to cover all the... Because it's we get so much funding from Europe each year, it's to ensure that we're compliant with all the regulations. Right. So there's money needs investment in the systems to make sure that we are compliant and then minimise disallowance. So the more you spend up front as an investment, the less disallowance will be whenever the EU comes in and looks what we spent the money on.
And I'm not inviting a response to this in case people think. So my conclusion could be then that investment could all be redundant on the 24th. Not inviting comment.
Cost saving.
And we're not commenting.
Okay.
No separate.
David?
Thanks, Chair. In rough terms, there's £20 million, over 40% of the budget, in the relocation and two big IT schemes. Should it so happen that there was any slippage in major schemes, have you got anything else up the sleeve, what you might call recurring capital, to ensure that we don't lose it?
I don't doubt that we have a large suite of
Shovel-ready
thoughts already.
Yeah, I mean, that has been our approach over the last number of years. We have a good track record in terms of financial performance, and it is part of our approach is making sure that we have shovel-ready projects that can go should we anticipate or expect any underspend or slippage on the larger schemes, as you rightly pointed out. So yes, we'll be monitoring them very closely, and if there is slippage, then we will seek to start those projects that we have ready.
Excellent.
Okay. Edwin?
Yeah, the business improvement scheme, how many grants have been awarded so far?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. How many?
Business improvement.
How many
scheme?
grants?
Yeah, you said it's been rolled out.
I don't know the answer to that unless anybody else has that information, but happy to come
Well, I think
back.
the point that Louise was making was around the business development groups, and that so there's a large number of farmers have started to engage in the business development groups in getting their thinking together before they roll out the capital grant schemes.
Have there been applications made yet?
To the business development groups?
To the schemes?
Not to the capital scheme. There hasn't been any that because we don't have the business case approval.
I just said you're saying it's been rolled out. It's more like steam rolled out at the speed it's going at. And I really think that, you know, it's been a fanfare about this £600 million, but when I need to start to see the evidence of it on the ground, and I think it's imperative that there needs to be a bit more focus putting the money on the ground and making things happen. It'll be, you know, hugely beneficial for the Northern Ireland economy whenever this does happen, because farmers will be making significant investment as well. So for the construction industry and everybody else, this will be a huge boost. On the AFBI side of things, you said that it would be to the advantage of AFBI, which I'm sure would be very unusual for them after 5 years of disadvantage. But could you just explain how you can take money that you're awarding to an organisation, you know, which was previously resource, and then fund them through capital? Because obviously that's not going to pay staff. It's not going to pay for people to do particular fields of research. You know, I raised the issue last week about the carbon capture and that course of research work that was being done and so forth. So how do you actually do this? Because, you know, capital's buildings, computers, vehicles and so forth. That's not human beings.
Well, the EASA 10 has been a change in Treasury guidelines in terms of how we categorise expenditure. So, as you say, staff salaries will be categorised as capital. So it's a change in methodology in how Treasury are recording expenditure on research and development. Perhaps they see it as an asset as opposed to an expendable resource. So that changing in approach, I do think, is helpful to AFBI, and that, as you know, capital's relatively easier to come across, and also not subject to in-year cuts as resources. So we do see it as a positive development.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just one point that I suppose we need to raise is that we don't have anything on the June monitoring round here today, is there?
No, and my apologies to the committee for that, Chair, but we're not in a position to share any documentation with you on June monitoring now, and as soon as the position does become clear, we will let you know.
Sorry, Chair, could I seek clarity? What do you mean you're not in a position to share with us now?
Still under consideration within the department.
By the Minister or by officials?
Officials and Minister.
Okay.
Okay. Harold?
Yeah, Chair, how do you intend to finance the total landings obligation that the fishermen are faced with? Obviously, as it even states here, it poses the most significant challenge to the local fishing fleet. So the department is providing some sort of financial support, I would imagine, for that, because there's no outlet for these total landings. So what is the position? And they find themselves in a very awkward position, criminal position. They can't proceed to dispose of these on the dockside. What's the position there? Do you have any plans for?
And on that one, I would have to revert, but I'm happy to do so, to the policy lead within that group, and come back to you with an explanation or a statement of their intention. So I think that I'd have to consult with the policy people before I could respond to you. Apologies.
George.
Thanks, Chair. Be very, very brief. It's just the development of country parks. Could you elaborate on? Is that appeal? Is that the existing country parks? Work to them, or?
I'll just ask Roger, is there anything leaping out at us there to assist on that one?
Yes, it's for larger capital enhancement works where there's been subsidence and closure of some parks in recent years due to heavy rainfall. So it's just to bring them back into condition so that visitors can enjoy it like they used to before the subsidence.
Would that include Limavady? Limavady?
That's Roe Valley.
Yes,
yes, Roe Valley was mentioned. Yes,
that's part of it.
Yes, yes.
That's to be welcome. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Louise, and your team for the briefing.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Okay, the next agenda item then is our oral briefing on the designated areas of natural constraint and review of CAP couple support. You find a clerk's memo, page 58, summary of responses to the consultation on future support to ANCs at page 68, summary of responses to the consultation on designation of ANCs at page 75, and summary of responses to the consultation on review of CAP couple support on page 80. I'd like to welcome Rosemary Agnew from the Food and Farming Group and Mark McLean, Principal Economist. If we can give you 10 minutes for the presentation, and then members will be able to ask questions, okay?
Okay, thank you, Chair. We very much welcome the opportunity to update you today. To try to bring members of committee up to speed a little bit on where we are, because obviously we started this whole exercise in the previous mandate. Common agricultural policy is the agricultural policy of the European Union. It implements a system of direct payments and other programmes with the aim of supporting the farming industry in rural areas in Europe. CAP consists of two pillars. Pillar 1 involves basic payments or greening payments to farmers, and Pillar 2 is support for rural development. And that's really sort of by way of background, and you'll see how that fits in as we move through. On the 16th of February 2016, the Department issued the 3 consultations that you mentioned, Chair, and those consultations closed on the 29th of April. And what Mark and I would like to do over the 10 minutes or so is to briefly say something about each of those 3 consultations and how stakeholders responded to them. And you have quite a detailed summary of those responses in your pack. The first consultation was on options for future support to areas of natural constraint. Approximately 1 million hectares of agricultural land in Northern Ireland is designated is agricultural land, and 70% of that is designated as LFA. Within that 70%, it's broken down into severely disadvantaged land, SDA, or disadvantaged land, DA. Support for farmers in the less favoured areas has been a long-standing support scheme under Pillar 2 of the CAP. And following agreement in 2013 of the new reform of the Common Agricultural Policy, Minister O'Neill issued a direction for the operation of an Areas of Natural Constraint scheme in 2016 and 2017 funded out of the Rural Development Programme 2014 to 2020, with a review of support arrangements to be carried out for the post-2017 period. And really, as part of that review that was agreed in 2013, DART issued the consultation on options for future support to areas of natural constraint. Consultation considered the ongoing need for specific ANC income support intervention given the changing nature of the structure of agricultural support payments. And the consultation document itself considered in total around 7 options for future support, although there are many other variants within the general approaches. 3 general approaches were presented in the consultation document. First general approach was do nothing. In other words, the claim that was made in 2016 and paid in 2017 would be the last, and there would be no more specific income support under an ANC measure for the areas. Second approach were a number of options involving the recycling of monies within the Common Agricultural Policy. In other words, the future ANC scheme would be funded by scaling back other income support payments being made to farmers. Within that, quite a detailed number of options, either placing the support scheme within Pillar 1 or scaling back, top slicing Pillar 1 payments and putting the money into Pillar 2 to take forward another scheme. So it was really all money within the one pot and redirecting it. And the third approach were nationally funded options, basically an ANC scheme in Pillar 2 funded by an additional 20 million per annum from the Northern Ireland Executive, or option 5B, a transitional ANC scheme in Pillar 2, which would basically tail out. Quite a lot of detail in the consultation documents on the impacts of those various options, and we sought the views of stakeholders on all of the options presented. In total, 16 responses were received to the consultations, 14 were received from organisations and 2 from individuals. Significant majority of the responses, perhaps not surprisingly, were in favour of what was called option 5A, and that's basically the option where the scheme would be funded by an additional £20 million per annum from the Northern Ireland Executive. In the event of no additional money being found from the Executive, the majority of responses from those, and I have to say from those who answered the question, were in favour of using a Pillar 1 mechanism to provide support. But farmer representatives' organisations strongly opposed any ANC scheme being funded by reducing the income of other support payments. Okay. I'll leave that there and we can take questions as we move through. Second consultation we issued was on designation of areas of natural constraint. Current designation encompasses around 70% of the total agricultural area in Northern Ireland. And as I said earlier, that's broken down between SDA and DA. European Regulation 1305/2013, which is the Rural Development Regulation, includes a requirement to designate ANC to replace the current LFA designation. Member States have until January 2018 to do this, and the timing of that redesignation process could be driven by the choice of future support to the areas. Any new designation must be approved by the EU Commission as a modification to the Rural Development Programme. In terms of the mapping requirements to achieve this new designation, some of the committee will be very well aware this has been ongoing for some considerable time, but the Commission has now placed it within its legislative framework as a 2-stage process. The first stage involves applying 8 biophysical criteria based on soil, climate and slope characteristics to agricultural land, and the area becomes constrained if it meets at least one of those biophysical criteria. Then, if an administrative unit is assessed as having more than 60% of its eligible agricultural area being affected by at least one biophysical criteria, it's mapped in as constrained land. The second stage required is to undertake a fine-tuning exercise to remove those administrative units where it can be demonstrated that the constraint has been overcome, and then you arrive at what's the final map. Obviously, the Commission provides regulation and guidance as to how you do this, and in the consultation document we explained that in significant detail. And we sought stakeholders' views on the approaches to the mapping exercise where we have a choice in what we may or may not do. In total, 15 responses to the consultation were received, of these 12 were received from organisations and 3 from individuals. The majority of the respondents agreed with the Department's suggestions, and again we can talk about those in more detail, but this specifically referred to the administrative unit that the designation is completed at, and the majority of the responses agreed that that should be done at ward level. And in terms of economic fine-tuning, the majority of respondents agreed that we would use gross value added as the economic indicator, and we would use a fine-tuning threshold of 90%. It is very technical, and it's all detailed in the Commission guidance. Having said that the majority of respondents agreed with that, it's important that I say to you that some key stakeholder organisations really want the current SDA boundary maintained. Ulster Farmers Union, Young Farmers Clubs of Ulster, Belfast Hills Partnership. But that is not possible under the legislation and the Commission guidance, but that is how they responded to our consultation. I'll now pass across to Mark to say something on the review of CAP couple support option.
Thank you, Chair. We held a consultation on couple support at the same time as the other 2 consultations. And by way of background, couple support is the linking of payments to farmers to production, for example on the number of suckler cows, on the number of ewes, or an area of a particular crop grown. At the moment under Pillar 1, all the payments aren't linked to production, and if we were to introduce couple support we would have to scale back the existing payments that go to farmers. So this is not new money, it would be the recycling of existing monies and making it conditional on a certain level and certain type of production. In terms of the limits and what we can do on that, we can have up to 8% of the Pillar 1 ceiling, and in certain circumstances perhaps up to as far as 13% of the Pillar 1 ceiling, plus an additional 2% for protein crops. 8% of the ceiling would equate to around €26 million per annum, and 13% at €43 million per annum. These issues around whether there should be couple support or not have been debated in the past, most notably back in 2003, and again reviewed in 2009, and again at the last CAP reform in 2013. And the decision each time with most stakeholder agreement was to not have a couple support. But the decision on the 26th of June 2014 did say that it would be kept under review. Hence the consultation now, and the timing is dictated by the fact that if we were to introduce couple support prior to 2020, we would have to have it notified to the EU Commission by the 1st of August 2016. Now, in terms of debate around couple support, most of the focus has been on beef and sheep. I should point out that the legislation stipulates that couple support is to maintain production if you think there's a risk of a decline, as opposed to increasing production. And hence there's been, most of the debate has been around beef and sheep, because there has been concerns that those sectors may decline, and especially in areas such as the SDA where there is very limited alternatives available to beef and sheep production. In the consultation we had put out an analysis around focusing on the beef and sheep sectors and also the SDA. And based on trends from 2005 to 2014, it didn't show a risk of a major decline was likely in the forthcoming period. Of course, you can never say for certain what's going to happen in the future. We can only base it on past events, but that's what the analysis was showing. Also, the impact of economic studies carried out on couple support would seem to suggest that it might lead to a small increase in production, but there would be a corresponding fall in price, and indeed farmers' incomes would be slightly lower as a result. In terms of responses, we received 19, 14 from organisations and 5 from individuals, and most opposed couple support. There were 2 organisations did support it, but only if it was new money. And as I explained earlier, it's not new money. It has to be scaled back from existing payments in Pillar 1. 2 organisations, the LMC and NIMEA, did support couple support in the beef sector, and they cited the decline in the beef sector that has taken place since 2012. And there was also 2 organisations, the Ulster Farmers Union and Young Farmers Clubs of Ulster, expressed support for couple support for protein crops. And the reasons that they cited was to help address the dependence on imported protein, to provide more break crop options, and also to offset the commercial advantage given to growers in the Republic of Ireland, where there is a protein crop premium at the moment.
Responses to each of the 3 consultations are on the DARE website, and the summary that we have shared with you should be loaded up onto the website later today. We're very happy to take any questions at this stage the committee have, and particularly any input that the committee wishes to give us into each of these consultations. Following the committee meeting today, we will seek our Minister's view, and we anticipate that she will decide on the way forward in each of these 3 areas relatively soon, given, as Mark mentioned, and certainly within the ANC consultation, the need to make decisions quite quickly, because it can impact on what we may need to do. So, thank you very much, Chair.
I suppose from my own point of view, you've already answered my question, because I was going to ask, have we any indication on what the Minister's preferences are, but obviously if you haven't had that conversation you wouldn't have. In the worst case scenario, if there was no money forthcoming for the support of the ANCs, what do you think the impact will be for those areas, the ANC areas?
Well, we considered that within option 1 as presented within the consultation document. If this is the last claim year for that scheme, it's the last payment of potentially 20 million to that SDA area. At an aggregate level, and again, I'm not sure if members have looked at the graphs in the back of our consultation document, but as a result of the single region model, €4 million per annum is moving from the disadvantaged area and the lowland to the severely disadvantaged area. So over the period in totality to 2019, 2020, 2021, we would anticipate that the payments made to those in the SDA would come back up at aggregate level to where they were pre-cap reform. But that's very much at aggregate level. At individual farmer level, obviously, there are differences. And we would anticipate that the largest impact would be on intensive cattle farms in the SDA. I don't know, Mark, do you wish to say anything more on that?
Yes, as Rosemary has outlined, you know, the graphs do show that, yes, at aggregate level, the SDA gains from moving towards a flat rate payment under the single region model by 2021. And indeed, that gain would offset sort of the loss of an ANC payment. But that's very much at aggregate level. At individual farm level, the picture is it's a lot more varied, and especially in the sort of specialist beef sector, those farmers in the SDA at the moment have payments above the regional average. So as we move towards a flat rate, some of those farmers will see a reduction in their Pillar 1 payment, and then there also, you know, if there was no money for the ANC, would obviously experience the reduction in that payment as well.
Eva?
I suppose within the responses there's quite a clear preference for the option 5A. If that was to be the option, and I'm not sure what the department's view on that, how confident would you be of being able to make a sufficient case to secure that investment from the executive?
Well, you're quite right in what you say, that that is a clear, obvious preferred choice of the respondents. I think we outlined within the consultation document, currently it's very difficult, and we have been unable to justify from a business case perspective that the current scheme delivers value for money. And that is why the last 2 years of the scheme have operated under ministerial direction. If our minister chose that particular option as the way forward, and a bid needed to be made to the executive. It would just have to be considered along with all of the other bids that the executive is considering, and obviously the weakness within bidding for it is our inability to prove that it will deliver value for money.
Oliver.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. But the view of the farmers in the area is there any reduction in funding at all would be disastrous. And they talk about that there would be, if the money gets kept, there'd be a rise in production, but it would drop again. But if we take the funding away, you would see a lot of farmers possibly going out because their income at the minute rock bottom. That just couldn't go any lower. Couldn't go any lower. It would be a proper disaster. I think this needs to take careful consideration what they're doing. Just can't go into the executive and be looked upon with all the other bids, even though you can't prove it was a value for money. I think talking to the industry, it is value for money because you're going to ruin the hill farmer altogether. And with everything that comes out of the hill, breeding stocks, everything else, I think it needs careful consideration. Any reduction in that year would be a disaster.
We very much appreciate your comments. In my statement about value for money, I'm looking at what we are required to do under a business case approval process to meet approval of the Department of Finance. And certainly all I can say is that the responses that we've received from many of the farmer organisations do recognise that this is required and this is needed. I think, I would perhaps counter you that, we're looking at it solely as an income support payment for those areas, and whether there's an opportunity to look at some other type of support for those areas if this fails, I'm not sure at this stage. That's very much a decision for a minister.
That would be a good idea because, and I understand your hands are tied in this rotary, but we need to look, if this fails, there needs to be a plan B because we just can't leave the hill on its own. It wouldn't survive. And it would have a knock-on effect for the industry. Thank you.
David.
Thanks, Chair. I redeclare that the land in which I have an interest is within original LFA and is unaffected by the current maps. I'm not saying anything about the provision of funding, but I do think there's a fundamental problem with the use of current electoral wards as a designation basis. My understanding was that the EU rules would not have ruled out townlands, that the original DART comment was that this would have created isolated islands, which would have perhaps looked anomalous. I must say I do find it anomalous that my constituents along the banks of the 6 Mile Water at the southern end of Parkgate Ward in which I live are regarded as LFA and my constituents on the Belfast Hills are not. I also find it difficult to see how some of the good land around McGilligan, which is amongst the best land in Northern Ireland, is being classified as LFA. And I would have thought in many, though clearly not in all instances, designation by townland would have been much more precise than designation by electoral ward. Not to mention the fact that townlands haven't changed for hundreds of years and electoral wards change every 10. And I'm not quite sure how you respond to that.
Well, within the consultation document, and I appreciate that you have examined it, we have and did present a map based on townlands. The European regulation allows us or asks us to designate at ward level, which is their LAU2, the local administrative unit, or at an economic or administrative boundary, and townland would fit that other definition. And at the time, we actually argued to get that inserted into the regulation. But as we have moved forward, it has become very apparent to us that whilst we can do stage 1 at townland level, which is the primary biophysical mapping, we are unable to do the economic fine-tuning at townland level. So essentially, in order to arrive at the map which is in the consultation document at townland, we have had to provide the primary map at townland level and overlay that with a fine-tuned map at ward level, and then various townlands fall out. We have significant concerns that the European Commission would not accept that approach, and as you can see, it does designate a much more patchy area. It also designates less land, and we just have significant concerns that it's not a robust methodology.
And has the Commission been asked to comment on the issue? I'm not quite sure also how you can't fine-tune at townland level if you can at ward level.
It's to do with the number of farms and the number of units that are within the area that you use to collect the data.
I'm not sure how many farms there are within Ballyclare North or Ballyclare South electoral ward, which you somehow managed to have done something on because they're both absolutely built up.
I can't honestly say to you, but remember that this designation is 60%. It's based on 60% of the agricultural land within the ward or townland being constrained by one of the criteria. So it's only the agricultural land within the ward that is looked at within this. And if you have a small area of agricultural land, it's quite easy to designate 60% of that area of agricultural land compared to if you have a larger ward with much more agricultural land in it. And I do take your point about wards. You know, the wards are set based on population density, but we are constrained by what the EU regulations require us to do. You know, stakeholders in the main are supportive of using wards because they can see the deficiencies with town land, but we do take your point. I'm going to ask...
My constituents on the Belfast Hills would disagree, and they're both directly affected.
And, you know, we've had many meetings with the Belfast Hills Partnership trying to examine their concerns, but at the end of the day we have exceptionally prescriptive rules for doing this, and at the minute we are trying to follow those. It doesn't mean that the maps that are presented within the consultation document won't be refined as we move forward with an approval process with the Commission, because there's a two-way engagement to ongo with the Commission where we have to defend and provide robust information about what we're doing and respond to Commission queries. The whole drive behind this is to ensure that there is a very transparent, consistent methodology across the EU. I was going to ask Mark, do you want to comment on the collection of data at townland level?
Yes, well, the economic fine-tuning is source of the data for the most part is from the Northern Ireland Agricultural Census, which is designed to have robust figures at Northern Ireland level. It's not a spatial survey in the sense that it doesn't gather details on where every farmer's land is located. It gathers details on the area of each farm. And in order to try and break that down to smaller units such as parliamentary constituencies or wards, you have to allocate the farming activity of the farm to where the farm is located. It is just about robust to do it at ward level, but as you've highlighted, there are some wards where there are problems because there are very low numbers of farms, because they're mostly built up areas. If we take that to town land level, that problem just becomes magnified, and indeed you can have town lands which are totally rural, but there is no farmyard located in them. So therefore there'd be no activity located to that particular town land. There would be other town lands where there are a small number of farms located in them. And again, once you get down to very small numbers, getting what are robust figures to do the economic fine-tuning at town land level just wouldn't be possible. So we get ourselves into a scenario that if we want, that we can use town lands for the biophysical criteria and we use wards for the economic fine-tuning. The outcome of that is we don't fine-tune any more wards in. What essentially happens is those wards that we have fine-tuned in, we then essentially the biophysical criteria takes town land areas out of those, the ones that wouldn't meet the criteria, so you end up designating less area.
Can I ask what information you have on the approach in the Republic? What areas they're basing it on?
We have had a number of meetings with colleagues right across both the UK and Republic of Ireland. At our last meeting with colleagues from the Republic of Ireland, they had only begun doing the biophysical mapping. Their intention is to do it at what they refer to as DED level, because their current LFA is designated at DED level, I think District Electoral provision, they had not started any fine-tuning work.
Okay. Just in terms of, there is a possibility of a mid-term review of CAP. What would or could be looked at in terms of that review?
Yeah, that is possible, and we're really at the moment we are waiting on details in terms of what direction the Commissioner will want to take this. First of all, there has been some work going on simplification, and we're expecting at the June Council 16 proposals round greening, but that will only affect what I think could be described as the secondary legislation, the delegated and implementing acts. So it's going to be very much on the fine detail, and we'll see what emerges there, and we'll consider it as we see it. In terms of a wider mid-term review, that will really depend on both sort of the Commissioner's attitude and Member States' attitude as to whether they want to reopen the basic acts or the primary legislation. And obviously one of the things in doing that is that it could put everything back on the table, because once you open them, people can come forward and say they want this changed or that changed, or more fundamental reforms. And there has been concerns raised by some Member States that, you know, we're not that long from implementing the last CAP reform, and to put another what could be major changes on the table so soon. There might be what is termed reform fatigue in relation to that. So I think we'll just have to wait and see what decision the Commissioner comes to in terms of how wide-ranging he wants the mid-term review to be.
Okay. Edwin?
Yeah, just on the potential transfer from Pillar 1, that's something that we would be totally opposed to. Absolutely no prospect of that. Pillar 1 farmers have lost out over the course of the last number of years. First of all, through transfer of their single farm payment to rural development programmes. Secondly, the last decision, which moved away from production-based farming to area-based farming, that helped those who operated on more extensive farms. So there is absolutely no prospect whatsoever of us supporting something which will come in again and have another go at the farmers who are actually producing the food and producing economic activity in the agri-food sector. Those are the farmers that need the greatest levels of support and highest levels of support, so it can create more employment in the agri-food sector. And as we grow our economy outside of Europe, with lots of opportunities in China and other places.
Okay, can I just say thank you for those comments? Certainly those would echo the responses that we have received from the farming organisations. There's no support whatsoever within the farming organisations for a transfer of any monies from Pillar 1. I would also add to that whilst the environmental organisations do support transfers from Pillar 1, they are not transfers to support an ANC scheme. The environmental organisations would like to see transfers to support enhanced agri-environment measures, and they've made that very clear in their responses as well. And again, that's contained in your summaries.
Okay. Nobody else has indicated that they want to ask any questions, so thank you very much for your. Thank you.
That's fine.
I'll just read out the Okay, then the next item is the statutory rule, the seed potato regulations 2016. A clerk's memo is on page 87 and the rule itself is on page 89. Okay.
Yes.
Must take us through.
Just very quickly, members, most of the detail is there for you. The rule was considered by the previous committee. there wasn't any concerns with it at the time when the department would like to consult on the seed potato regulations. There was only 3 responses. They haven't had them written down in the other document I haven't got them here, but and they were all. But basically, the 3 responses were all in favour of the seed potato regulations. There was no major issues with it at all. So what you have now is the stat rule. It's the first time this committee's had a stat rule in front of it, and the rule was led in the Business Office on the 23rd of March, and it is subject to negative resolution. Sorry. So its purpose is to implement EU standards for seed potatoes. As I said, none of the potato people in Northern Ireland, the potato merchants or Wilson's Country Potatoes or UFU have had any concerns with this at all. So there was a question, the examiner statutory rule still has to report on it, but assuming that she has no problems with it, I don't imagine that the committee necessarily will have any problems with the rule either.
Okay. So if members are content, then I'll put the following question, that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered Statutory Rule 2016/190, the seed potatoes regulations Northern Ireland 2016, and subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, has no objection to the rules. Are members agreed? Okay. The next agenda item then is our correspondence, and if you want to go to the correspondence index sheet at page 136, that's an index summary of all correspondence received and provides suggested action points for the committee to consider and agree. If you just want to take a look at those.
It's page 136.
Okay, Oliver.
The correspondence from Ilga. Maybe worthwhile the members think of finding out where Ilga, as far as the government goes, sees agriculture in the council. That's what they're asking there. To have local central government working together.
If you want, I can organise a meeting with the chair and deputy chair in Nilga. Would that be? Any other member who wants to come along?
I think that'd be beneficial to talk to Nilga about that there, because they're the main people representing council, and that's a way of finding out where council hold agriculture within their areas. We don't really know that because none of the council agriculture committee as such. There's rural committees not there, but where does agriculture figure in those committees? And after all, they'll be in the rural development programs.
Okay. Content that I organise a meeting with the chair and deputy chair and any other member who wants to come along. Okay. Great.
Okay.
Sorry, there is SPB.
Yeah, sorry. Just if I can also draw members' attention to the table papers, page 5, and the letter from RSPB in connection with meeting this group. Are members content that the clerk puts this on the list of visits to be organised?
Right.
Yeah. I think there is a suggestion.
Yeah, there's a suggestion. We're going to explore the possibility of doing the strategic planning day in their WOW centre, which is 10 minutes down the road. So maybe hit 2 targets at once.
Okay, the next agenda item is the forward work plan, and that's on page 143. Just to note, since the pack was issued on Monday, there has been a departmental request for the following change to be made, and that is the written briefing on office controls regulation to move from the 16th of June to the 30th of June, and the SL1 on plant health amendment order NA 2016 on the 16th of June. The department has also clarified that 2 group briefings will be on the environment, marine, fisheries and the food and farming groups. Okay, are members content with the requested change and with the forward work programme?
Yeah. There's a large number of written briefings coming up, particularly on the 30th of June, and I'm just going to keep a sort of a watching brief on that. Some of them may fall off, but at the minute there's quite a few. I suspect that we may get some more coming as well. So I'll just keep a watching brief and see how we can handle all of those. Okay. And then just to let you know, members, that we have now, people have responded whether they want to go to the Grocery Code Adjudicator Conference in London on Monday the 27th of June, and the visit to the National Ploughing Championships in County Offaly on Tuesday the 22nd and probably Wednesday the 23rd of June. September, yes, sorry, September. So there's only one person, Mr McKee, wants to attend the Grocery Code Adjudicator Conference, and we'll liaise with him to get that sorted. And we'll just, the other members who want to attend the National Ploughing Championships are the chairperson, Mrs Dillon, the deputy chairperson, Ms Archibald, Mr Bradley, and Mr McKee. And I think there's a question mark over the new member coming on board, I think from next week, who would be Mr Irwin, so we'll just double check with him.
I might go.
He might go as well. It's just we're reading that into the record. That allows us now to start working with Travel Desk to get travel arrangements and hotels and things booked.
No doubt.
Okay, so that's that done.
Short stay.
Okay, then last agenda item then is any other business?
Apologise for myself and Mr Anderson next week, so we'll be cheering on our wee country.
That'll be Mr Irwin as well.
And Mr Irwin as well.
I asked a question of, say, last week, and they're going to come back to me with an answer. When do you get that answer?
We normally get those answers within 10 working days of receipt of the letter in the department, which the department should normally receive the letter on Friday, so it'll be 10 working days after that.
You're only on here and you're looking answers to questions. You know, some of us are waiting years for answers.
I'm still waiting.
Okay, our next meeting then will be Thursday, the 16th of June, room 30 at 10 a.m.
Chair, from my own point of view, I'm finished with you.
Thank you very much.
Pastures new.
Well done, George.
Thank you very much.
Was I that bad?